Ahead and get us going. Hello. All right, it looks like it's working for us today, so that's super exciting. So, I have a question for you today. Have you ever had a student come in for a trial, love your classes, walk out the door without actually enrolling? It's totally frustrating and makes you wonder what the heck it is that you're doing wrong. But the reality is, it may be that your sales process didn't speak to the way that they actually buy. And so here's the deal. So, what makes someone buy from you? It's a question that we have. That is to enroll their child into your studio, or book a birthday party, or add on additional classes, or even audition for the performing company. So, today in this week's episode, I want to break down for you the three distinctive types of buyers because they are distinctive, their characteristics, and how to appeal to each. And so, do you want a copy of today's show notes? Let me know. You could share it with your staff. Drop the word buyer below, and we'll get you access to that as soon as it's ready. If you're joining me, say, hey, Erin, what's up? Let me know that you're here. I want to know who's here with me today so we can chat and have a conversation about this. And if you are new here to the Erin Burd Live Show, I'm Erin Burd, and I support studio owners and educators to grow their businesses by creating their own unique vision of success, all without the burnout, all without the overwhelm, or sacrificing their personal lives. I believe that you can have everything that you actually dream and desire. You just got to have a plan to get there, right? And so, if you know any others that may need to hear this conversation today, feel free to sprinkle the love around. You are more than welcome to tag someone here, share it out there to the world. But let me know that you're here before we dive right in today. We actually have a lot of information to cover, so let me know in the comments where you're coming from. And oh, it's actually a little chilly here this morning, so I've got my warm sweater on. So is it cold there where you're at? I want to know. All right, so let's go ahead. Hey there, good morning. So let's talk about this real quick, right? Let's talk about it. So there are three very distinctive types of buyers. And when I work with my clients, we start to talk about, and I'm sure you've heard time and time again about the ideal client or the ideal buyer or the ideal family or ideal student, right? That is inside of that's coming in that you want to attract. And I think sometimes we forget that we need to include the buying type of our ideal client or our ideal student, and how we create our messaging should align with how and who our buyers are. And so let's dive into the three types of buyers, and then we are going to talk a little bit about how do we actually attract and sell to those specific types of buyers. Okay, so y'all ready to dive on in? Let's do this. Okay, so the first type of buyer that I want to identify is called a spendthrift. A spendthrift. Now, Erin, what's a spendthrift? So, a spendthrift is somebody who tends to is quick action, sees something they want, buys it. Right? Some people might call them impulsive. Some people would say that their buying decisions are solely based on their emotions. They tend to not be big savers, right? And the pain of the sale comes after they actually buy, where they might regret after they've actually made the decision. Okay? So that is a what we call a spendthrift, right? Somebody who's driven on emotion, doesn't look at a budget or may not even have a budget, right? And their decisions are based on their emotions, really. Okay. The second type of spender is what we call an average spender. So average spenders, which typically are going to be your widest group of buyers, but these are people who buy on emotions as well as facts, right? So they're going to be average savers. They're going to look at value. They're going to look at emotion. They're going to look at data, right, to make their decisions. But they're not going to be so impulsive. They're probably going to take a little bit longer to buy, and they're going to be thinking about more of the overall picture when you're dealing with average spenders, right? So they still want to make sure that it aligns with their budget or that it makes sense. All right. So you've got spendthrifts, you've got average spenders, and the third type of buyer that you have are what we call frugalists, right? They're frugal, which means the pain of a purchase comes before they actually ever buy. They are sometimes deemed as, I don't want to say oversavers, but because they're so worried about spending any money, they will hold off on buying because of the pain that it causes them to think of actually spending the money. And here with Frugalist, what we have to remember is that their buying decisions are based really on facts, data, their budget, and their perceived value. Frugalists are known to impose what they feel the value of your product or services, not based upon what you have listed it as. So let's say you have summer camp that you've listed for $99. I don't know, I'm just throwing out numbers, right? But in a frugalist's mind, if they don't think it is worth $99, maybe they feel like it's only worth $50 to them, right? Even though you've set the value of your summer camp, to them, they already had this preconceived notion of the value of what you do. So you are going to be very hard to find and convince them that it is worth double because they already have decided what it's worth. And, I have to tell you guys that I had, and this happens, I just threw my pen. This happens a lot. I just had a client who had gone ahead and done some Facebook ads for their summer session. And they listed their prices and they had some people say, oh my gosh, that's so expensive, right? And the truth of the matter is that these people were frugalists and they were not her ideal clients, right? So that leads us into, now that we've identified the three different types of buyers, right? I want to know before we go forward, like, can you share with me what type of buyer you are? Let me know in the comments. I want to know. Because, okay, here's the truth of the matter. I'm an average spender. In my younger years, I would have even been called a spendthrift. Right? Like in my younger years, I would have fallen into that category because truthfully, I wasn't right with my money, right? And I saw something and I wanted it and I got it. Now, as I'm older, I've grown, I've matured, and I have businesses to run, right? I am more of an average spender in that I have a budget, I look at the numbers, it has to make financial sense. But there is a layer of emotion that I still tap into, feelings for certain things, right? And so I'm willing to spend a little bit more money on certain things if I can see the value and or the return on my investment, or the joy that it will bring to my life or my family's life, right? So I used to be a spendthrift. Now I'm an average spender. And if you're coming in on the replay, that's okay. I still want to know. Drop in the comments. What are you, a spendthrift, an average spender, or a frugalist? Right? I want to know. And if you come in on the replay, I'll come back in and we'll continue this conversation together. Right? So now that we've identified the 3 types of spenders, buyers, right? Spendthrifts, average spenders, frugalists, and we've shared without concern of judgment what type of buyer you are, right? Because honestly, when we look at ourselves, it helps us to see how this can come out in other people, right? Depending on the product, interest, benefits to me, I feel I'm a little of all 3. Okay, yes, and that is okay, right? But what tells me is more than likely you're probably an average spender for the most part, right? Because you're taking a little bit from column A, from the spendthrifts, a little from column C, to come up right in column B and have a little bit of both, right? But I love that you're sharing with us. Thank you so much for being willing to share. Yes, combo of spendthrift and average. Awesome. Yes. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Y'all, I got my hand clappers today. It's a good day. Okay. So now that you know that you're a combo or whatever, this kind of helps you to identify others and their spending habits. So how do we, first of all, identify who we want to be our ideal clients? So now I know I might get some pushback on this, but I typically am going to say for most privatized studios, frugalists are probably not going to be their top spending category, right? Spender category. Because if you've been around me for a while, you know I don't want you to be the dollar store and the bargain basement of dance or gymnastics or karate or whatever it is that you're providing a service for, right? Those are wonderful models for, Walmart, dollar store, but they're based on large numbers. Right? So for what I could tell you is for most of us, frugalists are going to be the toughest to sell to. They have to see immense value in what you're doing to be compelled to go through the pain of handing over their hard-earned cash. And have you ever had families or students that make comments like how you're always nickeling and diming them, how you're, everything's so expensive. Why are costumes so expensive? Why are you raising your tuition? Why are you da, 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 da? Those are probably falling in that frugalist category. And so when you have a lot of people inside your studio who are within that category, it's going to probably give you more stress and anxiety, right? Because they're probably not the perfect fit, right? You may love their kiddos, but if it feels like you're pushing and pulling, like every time mom or dad goes to hand over a check and it's like, they're holding on to it, right? It makes things so tough. And so while they're, not all frugalists are bad, y'all, but they aren't influenced by things like, if you were to say something like, well, you or your child deserve this, that is not going to influence them, right? But something like, maybe even saying this is an investment into you or your child, right? Like that is something that is going to resonate with them more. Okay, so let's talk about those spendthrifts and those average spenders. Okay, so here's the thing. Spendthrifts are really easy to get to say yes when you get them in the door because they are living on emotions. So if you have, we talked about in the beginning, if you have a student who comes in for a trial that absolutely loves it, is smiling, laughing, happy the whole time, that parent sees the joy that dance or whatever is going to bring to them in that moment. And that is all they need to feel compelled to sign up right then and there on the spot. Okay. Awesome. No problem. Go to your appointment. So spendthrifts are really easy to get to say yes. Now, I will say that the danger with spendthrifts is that because they are driven only on emotion and they don't factor in their budget, that you can run into where they don't have the money to continue, they get behind, those sort of things because they haven't properly planned or budgeted because they were driven on emotion only. And so this is where with spendthrifts, it's like sometimes it's so easy because they see and they feel the atmosphere and they know the studio culture and like they came in and it was just like their second home, right? And they knew right then and there that this was the place for them. And they enrolled their child in 3 classes all at once, right? Which can feel amazing until the pain of the sale happens after the fact with spendthrifts. And that's when the reality might come crashing down that they did not, in fact, plan and budget accordingly. Okay. So, where do we find and how do we sell to these average spenders? Because the average spenders are the people who are the combination of spendthrifts and frugalists, right? They do take emotion into account, right? But they also do look at the budget and the value, the perceived value that they have, and they weigh the pros and cons, and they might take a little bit longer to buy. And so this is why when you have a student who comes in for a trial, they love it, and the family leaves without enrolling, they may fall into this category because before the trial, they didn't have enough information to make their informed decision. And so for average spenders, we want to be doing things like talking about the value, talking about the studio culture, talking about the emotion, but we also need to show them data and facts, right? So the data and facts says, hey, this is what the tuition is. This is what the costume fee is. This is what the recital fee. They want to know all the numbers because they need to know if it's going to fit within their budgets. And if it's not, they have to feel strongly emotionally tied enough to figure out how to make it work or what they can switch inside their budget to make it work. And so sometimes that does take time for people. Those average spenders, they need to leave and come back or go on once they're home and they go through things and they talk it out with their significant other or whatnot. Then they can come back or go online and they can go ahead and register. So if you've ever had, let me know in the comments, have you ever had where people come in for trial and they leave and then you're like, well, what the heck? Like, you could clearly tell that this is where their child wants to be. Like, it was great. This is why. Because either they fell into those average spenders or frugalist category, and the frugalist still did not see the value in what you were offering. And so when we are getting ready and we're creating our perfect ideal avatar, right? Our ideal client, here is what I always tell my clients to do. If you already have a client base, I want you to think of like 3 ideal families Like when you close your eyes, you could see them and you know that they're perfect for you. And when you're creating that and you're talking about what makes them the perfect fit for your studio or your dojo or your gym, right? What makes them the perfect fit? And one of the things should be their buying habits, right? Because you and I both know you have some families who one of the ideal, they might, anything you put out there, they're going to buy. They're going to buy. And it's probably because they're a spendthrift. And they already love what you do. And so they trust and like you so much that they're going to say yes, like without hesitation, right? And then you might pick another parent that's an ideal parent, but maybe they are an average spender. And what about them and what did you have to do to get them to say yes? Or do they take a little bit longer? Do they need all of the data clearly laid out for them in front of them before they make a decision? Because those spendthrifts, you could just say, oh, hey, by the way, I'm going to start this new acro class. Do you want, Julie to be in the class? And they'll be, oh my gosh, yes. They know nothing about the acro class other than the fact that you told them you're going to be adding it. And yes, we want it, right? Where that average spender, you might say, hey, we're going to be starting an acro class. I think it might be good for Peyton, and here's why, and you give them the reasons. And then you hand them over all the details, the data, right? The information. When is the acro class going to be held? How much is it going to cost? What skill sets are you going to be working on in the class? This is where those average spenders, they do need a little more data. They need more information to decide if, yes, it's the right fit for them. And so what I love for my clients to do is to pick at least 3 different families to create as we work on your ideal client avatars, and their buying and spending habits should be listed. They should be listed. Because when you are selling, you are going to sell differently to different group sets. And that's okay. Right? That's okay. I have a friend who is we joke. She even jokes about it, but she's like, I'm a tightwad. I'm a frugalist. Like, I know that saving gives me comfort and peace of mind. And so it takes me a really long time to buy. I'm like, well, what do you mean? She's like, oh, if it's a big decision, she's like, it took her almost 3 years to decide on buying a new car. Not because she didn't know she needed a new car or she wanted a new car. For her, it was painful to think about handing over that much money. Like, would cause her anxiety, right? And so she let it go on for these years until she had no other choice. Not because she didn't have the money, not because she didn't realize and acknowledge that she needed a new car, but she knew that she called herself a tightwad, but she knew she was a frugalist, and that the pain of releasing that money, it was too much. So she just prolonged it and prolonged it and prolonged it until she had no other choice. And so I think a lot of times it comes down to that. So we have to be able to articulate not only the value, but the emotions and the whys when it comes to how we market to people. And when I say market to them, that means through email, social media, ad spend, through just our regular copy, how we talk to parents, how we communicate, right? Because there are going to be different drivers for each different type of buyer. And so we have to acknowledge that, and we have to know who is in our studio right now, and then who do we actually want to bring into our studio? So let me know in the comments. If you had to choose one type of buyer to market to, what would it be? Would you market to those spendthrifts, to those average spenders, or to the frugalists? I want to know. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments. Okay, so I always do that. I always knock things around, y'all. All right, let's go ahead. We're going to do a speedy recap real quick and talk about the 3 different types of buyers, how to identify them, and how to sell to them, right? Because when you are going to enroll new students, their parents' buying habits are absolutely going to affect your bottom line. So many times I have people tell me, Erin, I had someone come in for a trial, they loved the class, and then they left and they never enrolled. What the heck? And so this is going to probably explain to you why. So the 3 types of buyers that we have are spendthrifts, average buyers, and frugalists, right? Spendthrifts, they thrive and they're driven by emotion. Only they're not good savers. The pain of the purchase comes after they actually purchase. There might be regret and remorse, but they are quick to buy, maybe even called impulsive, right? The second type of buyers is an average buyer. Now, these people, they do thrive on emotion a little bit, but they also like to look at the data. They like to see if it fits within their budget, and they take a combination of the both to make their buying decisions. Most of our families that come in are probably going to fall into that category, because they connect emotionally to what this is providing for their child or their student, but they also have to look at the numbers. And so to them, they need all the data to know, and then they use the emotion as part of that decision-making process. And the third type of buyer is a frugalist, y'all. This is where the pain happens before the purchase. They are super savers and they don't want to let go of their money, right? And they also figure out their own perceived value on a product or a program, regardless of what you have priced it for. And if it doesn't fall within what their preconceived notion is, it is going to be very, very hard to get them to buy. And so with these 3 types of buyers, we need to be able to know how to speak to each one and which one we actually really want to sell to. And so when you're creating your client avatar, absolutely go through, plug in who your spendthrifts are, who your average spenders are, and who your frugalists are, and look at their characteristics and their buying habits and what drives them and motivates them, because this will give you clarity when it comes to marketing to that specific group. Okay, so I hope that gave you guys some clarity on the 3 different types of buyers, how to identify them by their spending habits, and how to start to speak to them to get them to that yes. Now, I have to tell you guys, this last weekend, I did what I call like the most laid back training ever on the keys to creating a successful mobile studio or a mobile program. And we did it inside a Facebook group. It was super chill. We did a live Q&A yesterday, which was absolutely fabulous. I think that if I do say so myself, we had a great time. Lots of questions were answered. And what also happened was I announced the doors were opening to the mobile mastermind. And so if you are interested in growing or launching your own mobile program where you go out to preschools, daycares, private schools, after school programs, retirement communities, and you're looking for some support from somebody who's been there and done that, who's taken their program and grown it into multiple 6 figures, and you want to be in a community with like-minded people, then I want us to chat. So if you are interested in learning more about the mobile mastermind, just drop mobile in the comments below, and I would love for us to chat a little bit more, and we can also get you information on that. I'm going to leave you there for today. I will be back next Wednesday, same time, same station, with more business, mindset, and joy-filled time together. Till then, I'm Erin Burd, your dance studio strategist who helps studio owners and educators just like you to get outside the four walls of your studio, to grow your business, and to create your own unique vision of success. I'm going to leave you all there. And until next week, my friends, stay you, stay awesome, and go out and play more. I will talk to you soon. Bye, my friends.